This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Well, President Obama informally jettisoned blue-collar families in his 2012 election.
Oh, Saturday was Barack Obama Day, by the way. I don't know what you did to celebrate.
Barack Obama Day where?
In Illinois. It wasn't an official holiday, but it was just recognition.
Oh.
Yeah. I don't know what you did.
I went shooting, actually, to celebrate it, which is, I think, appropriate. And so he jettisoned white, blue-collar working families. And then it's been formalized in the intervening 6 years. The Netroots Nation Conference, as memorialized in the Atlantic, pointing out that 5 keynote speakers of color, all of whom underline the potential of a multiracial coalition of voters made up of African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, progressive whites, under the tutelage of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And Marcos, the Daily Caller's Marcos Moulitzas was on Meet the Press this weekend, and embracing socialism and the label.
You either embrace the label and own it and be a player, or you can be like Andrew Cuomo and be off on the sidelines and irrelevant. That's where this is going. Because when you really look at what that so-called socialist platform is, and Nixon's right, they're going to accuse us of being communist before all is said and done. When you look at it, it's basically healthcare, access to healthcare, access to education. I mean, these are things that people actually like. If you go down item by item, people actually want these things. Donald Trump may not. He doesn't want his taxes to go up. But everybody else kind of does. So I actually want to have that debate. Let them talk about what it means to be a socialist. We're not the party that's being bought and paid for by Russia. If we want to talk about this, the socialists, we are the party that is looking out for Americans and America.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Marcos, let's have that debate. I'm looking forward to it. I'll put up our folks against Cynthia Nixon and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that's for sure. How will that play in Central Ohio? We're going to find out tomorrow. And for some insight on that and the political landscape generally, we're pleased to be joined again by Salena Zito, Washington Examiner reporter, New York Post columnist, CNN contributor, also the author of the new book, The Great Revolt, Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. Salena, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So they're stuck on socialist on the left side of the aisle. How does that play out, and how much should we take away from whatever the outcome is tomorrow in Central Ohio in that special?
Well, it's really interesting to watch, this pitch left, a very far left for the Democratic Party, because it's exactly what we calculated and warned about in the Great Revolt, in looking towards what's going to happen not only in 2018 but 2020. The very one thing that we reported in the Great Revolt is that if this happens, this only strengthens and gives the opportunity for Trump to win again in 2020, and for the Republicans to hold on to more seats than maybe they possibly historically should, because the reaction by the Democrats to this new populist coalition is to go left. And so when I was just in Ohio 12, it's counties surrounding Columbus, Ohio, for this special election, and maybe I'm just seeing something different, but I certainly didn't see what a lot of people are predicting, which is a tight, close race between the Republican Balderson and the Democrat O'Connor. Now, Danny O'Connor, the Democrat that is running, is a moderate Democrat, but unfortunately, he has to then answer for the Democrats that have gone far left. And that doesn't help him because he stumbles, and he doesn't quite know how to sort of ditch the Democratic Party but then not ditch it. So it's a problem that I think a lot of Democrats will have to face in November.
And what should their answer be? I mean, you just can be true to who you are, correct?
Well, I personally think that's the better thing to do. I think Democrats and Republicans need to run to represent the districts that they live in rather than a national theme. But that doesn't seem to be the wisdom that a lot of them do, right? I mean, even Republicans, if your district is similar to the populism of Trump, then run what represents your district. Don't run as Donald Trump. And the same for Democrats. If you are not a socialist, do not run as though you're going to be representing a Brooklyn, a Brooklyn seat, and or even a Nancy Pelosi seat, which is San Francisco, right? If your district isn't that liberal and you want to win that seat, that's the last way you need to run as a candidate.
How do you receive, speaking of President Trump, how do you receive, because you think a little bit differently than the prevailing wisdom, such as it is in the D.C. press corps, how do you receive those tweets that Trump offers that target members of the D.C. press corps, name calling and criticism and allegations of fake news that have, the likes of Maria Hinojosa at NPR suggesting that the D.C. press corps boycott White House press briefings, send the interns, and don't cover any of the Trump rallies because that's not news. How do you receive this interplay between the president and the D.C. press corps?
Presidents have forever and a day not particularly cared for the way the press has covered them. Donald Trump, it just vocalizes what most of them thought. This is a different guy, and he approaches things in a different way. It doesn't change how I cover things. There was something that really just got under my skin over the weekend, where the D.C. press corps got their panties in a bunch, if you will, over the museum, which is a museum dedicated to news, covering, selling fake news T-shirts.
Right.
And they just took them to task and were just like so over the top outraged. And I responded and said, look, if you're gonna, you can't be outraged over a T-shirt in your job. Like you just
want one
can't.
of those T-shirts.
In particular, if you're a member of the press, if that offends you, then you should get a different position, a different job. I mean, I didn't enter this job to be liked. 90% of the time, both sides of the aisle hate me, and that's like considered a normal day. I don't understand that, and I don't understand just being all the dramatics and the smelling salts. I mean, just do your job.
Well, I mean,
I get threats all the time. I get abused all the time on Twitter. I get the worst emails and direct messages, but I don't advertise it, and I don't lose my mind over it. It's part of the job.
I don't even think it's so much. I mean, if I'm doing a little bit of armchair psychoanalysis here, I don't even think it's so much like these the threats that supposedly they're under, or Jim Acosta being chanted at. I think it's the sense that they expect people to genuflect before them and hold them up to be the vanguard class that they think they are, speaking truth to power, being a check on power, when in point of fact, they often are acting as handmaidens to power, just not this president, that's all.
We're not in a different class. We're no different than anyone else, and I'll just leave it there.
Okay.
But some think of themselves as movie stars. I mean, they do. I know some reporters who tried acting. They couldn't get into acting, so they became reporters. I mean, it's pathetic.
Yeah. Let me ask you this about this piece that your colleague Byron York penned over the weekend in the Washington Examiner about the documents released, the Christopher Steele documents released on Friday, which, among other things, detail that Steele kept providing information to the FBI after his contractual relationship had ended, which is actually in contravention to FBI procedure. And he used Bruce Orr, essentially at the Department of Justice, whose wife was working for Fusion GPS, if we can follow all this, as a cutout, essentially, to communicate to the FBI. And, of course, Byron York, being the diligent journalist he is, specifies the number of times there were meetings and communications and so forth that it revealed in these documents that were released. How important is the continued detailing of the interconnection between all of these Obama-era officials at Department of Justice and FBI and in the intelligence community and their violations of their own procedures? Also, somebody violated the law on unmasking Michael Flynn, which everybody has sort of forgotten about. How important is it to keep reporting on this to essentially act as a check on the legitimacy of the Mueller investigation?
Well, I mean, that's essentially that's her job. It's that kind of detailed reporting and connecting the dots and keeping power in check is an integral part of our job. Not just the click of the moment, not just the gasp of the moment. In fact, actually, I would argue those are the least important aspects of reporting. And what Byron is doing is critically important, and one of the few people that has consistently covered this with the detail that it deserves and needs.
And the other question that this prompts, the Carter Page FISA document release, so these documents on Friday is, and perhaps this requires more prodding from the media as well. Why won't President Trump use his power to declassify or release more information related to this investigation and lay it bare for the American public?
Right. I mean, I think that's going to be the pressure going forward, right? I think that's something that's important that he does, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's not something that he does do in the not too distant future.
All right. She is Salena Zito, Washington Examiner reporter, New York Post columnist, and CNN contributor. The book, The Great Revolt Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. Salena, thanks always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Take care.
She joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.